And good evening, and welcome to Minnesotans Military Appreciation Fund's virtual Veterans Day event. My name is Tom Hauser, and I'm the chief political reporter for 5 Eyewitness News. I will be your MC this evening. Over the past several years, I've had the privilege of being the MC of the MMAF Appreciation Dinner in person, of course, but I'm glad we're at least back to be able to join you virtually supporting MMAF, such a worthy cause here in the state of Minnesota. Again, while I'm saddened we have been unable to gather together in person this year, I want to thank everyone for taking the time and the effort to join us tonight in support of Minnesota's service members and their families. And of course, my family has a long military history. My dad served in the Air Force in the late 1940s. Prior to that, his brother, my uncle Florian, served in World War II and fought in the Philippines. And then on my mom's side of the family, her youngest brother gave his life. He made the ultimate sacrifice in support of his country when his plane went down, as he was a naval aviator off the USS Coral Sea back in 1963, and his plane went down off the coast of Japan, and his body was never found. In fact, very little wreckage of his plane was ever found, and it had a devastating and lifelong impact on my mom and the rest of her family. So certainly some major sacrifices in my family and most of your families as well, and that is why we are gathered here tonight. And of course, today, very fittingly, is Veterans Day, so it is fitting that we offer a thank you to those joining us this evening who have either served or are currently serving in the armed forces. We appreciate your service and the sacrifices you have personally made to our great country. We would also like to take a moment of silence to recognize those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice to their country. We have not forgotten and will never forget them. Let's now pause for a brief moment of silence. And thank you. It takes a community effort to fully support military members, veterans, and their families in this increasingly divided country, complicated even further by the COVID-19 pandemic. But tonight, we join together to say thank you to those who have served and those who continue to serve tonight, and keep this statewide effort of thanking our service members both strong and vital. We appreciate all of our sponsors this evening. Let's take a look at who they are. It is so great to see all those sponsors still stepping up, even though we could not have an in-person event. They did not forget about MMAF and still stepped up in a big way. And I've got to say, speaking of stepping up in a big way, the one thing I miss the most about us not being in person is the music of Vocal Essence led by Philip Burnell. Give them a round of applause at home. Such a wonderful memory every year when they do that military medley. I know I get goosebumps even when I heard the recorded version tonight. But again, hopefully next year we will be back together in person and hearing Vocal Essence in person as well. Now, tonight we will be hearing from our featured speaker of the evening. He is familiar to most of you, retired U.S. Army General Joseph Votel. Many of you know that General Votel is a Minnesota native and passionate supporter of MMAF. General Votel was the keynote speaker at the 2019 MMAF Appreciation Dinner, and we are grateful that he is joining us once again tonight. But first, I would like to introduce Roger Sitt. Roger is the chair of MMAF and CEO of Sitt Investment Associates. Roger's father, the late Gene Sitt, founded MMAF in August of 2005 in response to the tragedy of 9/11. Roger continues his father's vision for MMAF. And prior to his career as an investment manager, Roger was a captain in the U.S. Air Force, serving 6 years active duty with financial management responsibilities at Headquarters Space Division. Roger graduated with military distinction from the U.S. Air Force Academy in 1984. And please join me in welcoming Roger Sitt. Roger.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. In these unusual times, MMAF has been forced to become more creative. In getting the word out. So thank you for your flexibility and your understanding. Tonight, we honor our military members for their service, their commitment, and their sacrifices. We honor their families for their unending encouragement and support. And we thank all of them for the importance they provide our nation, protecting our rights and our freedoms. A special thank you this evening to General Votel for being our speaker, as well as to General Votel and his family for your 40+ years of service. We also extend our gratitude to everyone who has donated in the past, as well as all the donors this evening. As Tom highlighted, this is truly a grassroots effort from across the state of Minnesota. I want to note that we continue a solid track record of more than 90 cents of every dollar raised goes directly to our service members and their families in the form of grants. We keep a very, very low cost structure. Our mission is simple. We thank Minnesota service members by awarding cash grants to all military members who have served honorably in a combat zone since 9/11/2001. And there are no conditions on how the grants are spent. I am pleased to report that thanks to your generous contributions, MMAF has awarded nearly 18,200 grants totaling nearly $12.2 million to Minnesota service members since MMAF started in 2005. You should all give yourself a round of applause for that. Thank you. The composition of grants are as follows. $500 grants have been awarded to over 17,600 Minnesota service members who have served honorably in a combat zone without injury. $2,000 grants have been awarded to 510 Minnesota Purple Heart recipients. Of those 510, 335 of those 510 have received a second grant totaling up to $8,000 based on the severity of their injuries. And finally, $5,000 grants have been awarded to 67 families of those Minnesota service members that were killed in action. 2020 has been a critical year for MMAF. Not only were our service members and their families dealing with the economic impacts of COVID, just like the general public, but large deployments continued. The sense of urgency was unlike anything we saw in the 15 years of MMAF's existence. This combination resulted in a 400% increase in the number of grants awarded over the same time frame in past years. We have awarded over $715,000 in grants this year alone. The need for MMAF fundraising continues. We estimate that since 9/11/2001, there has been between 45,000 to 50,000 Minnesotans, whether in the National Guard, Reserve, or active duty, that have served in a combat zone. Currently, there are 700 National Guard soldiers from Mankato Base, 2nd Battalion, 135th Infantry deployed in Africa. A few weeks ago, we saw a return of nearly 700 members from the Minnesota National Guard 34th Combat Aviation Brigade that returned from the Middle East. And there are upcoming deployments, 2 of which we are aware of. Nearly 100 soldiers from Battery C 1st Battalion, 194th Field Artillery will deploy to Afghanistan. And more than 150 soldiers from the 34th Military Police will deploy to Naval Station Guantanamo Bay in support of Joint Force Guantanamo. As mentioned, our service members are dealing with COVID just like the general public. They have suffered furloughs as well as job losses. Many self-employed veterans were not eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program or PPP money. Further, many of them were not eligible for unemployment benefits. Therefore, our mission continues. We support Minnesota military members and their families. We owe a great debt for those who carry the burden for the rest of this country. We must uphold and honor these selfless men and women. Thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you for your continued support, and please enjoy the evening.
All right, and thank you so much, Roger. Boy, you really laid it out there. One of those things that many people don't think about, but here on the home front, we're all dealing with the pandemic and the fallout and the layoffs that many people have suffered, either the husband or the wife, or in some cases both. And then you have people serving in the National Guard, you have active duty military. It's incredible the additional burden that they must be feeling. So it's great that an organization like MMAF exists to help fill in some of the void created by this pandemic. Well, now I would like to introduce our keynote speaker, General Joseph Votel. He retired last spring as a 4-star Army general and commander of United States Central Command, better known to many of you as CENTCOM, responsible for our nation's security interests across the most volatile regions in the world. General Votel now resides here in Minnesota, and we're happy to have him, of course, after nearly 40 years serving in the highest and most sensitive assignments around the world. General Votel will share insight on the COVID-19 pandemic and how it has impacted the U.S. military and military interests around the globe. And if you have questions for General Votel during his remarks, please submit them via the chat function on your screen. And during a Q&A segment that I will have with the General after we hear from him, we can get to some of your questions. So without any further ado, please welcome General Joseph Votel. General.
Thanks, Tom. It's great to be with you again. It's great to see you again. I have to tell you, I have been tracking you virtually in your running experience here over the last year, and it's been really joyful to watch you and your family as you move through that. And thanks for your great passion for MMAF. So good to see you. Roger Sitt, thank you very much for inviting me to be here again this evening, and for your prime leadership, and your sponsorship, and really to the broader Sitt family. It was without note here the significant contribution the Sitt family has made to this effort. And I'd also like to express my thanks to Skip Krosick and Joe Bennick, who are the program managers here and have been important team players here in making this happen. And of course, to all of our sponsors, my greatest thanks to you. So as noted here, it's been about 18 months since I last had an opportunity to talk to MMAF audience here over in Minneapolis back in early May of 2019. At the time, I'd just been retired about a month and a half or so. So I was relatively new into it, and kind of the halcyon days of retirement. I should share with you that not long after that, my wife invited me to sit down and have a little discussion. And during that, she explained to me that marriage is for love and not for lunch. And as a result, I was invited to go out and try to find some jobs and get myself busy. And so I have done that. and I'm happy to tell you I'm gainfully employed here and doing a variety of things. I'm a president and CEO of a national nonprofit organization called Business Executives for National Security that leverages business expertise and provides that business expertise to our government partners in the national security enterprise. I'm joined the board of a great veterans-oriented organization called Service to School that really focuses in on helping enlisted veterans get into the very best schools across our nation. It's an exceptional program that they do, and I'm very, very proud to work with them. And I'm doing some work with some other companies, to include a small family company right there in St. Paul, Minnesota Wire. I'm very, very proud to be associated with, and it's just great to be out there seeing the country through this particular lens right here. So everything's going pretty well for us, and I'm happy to report that our transition has continued to go well. I think it's going well. I actually overheard my wife the other day on the phone, and she was apparently talking to one of her friends, and I think she was talking about me. And I think she said that, for 39 years, he had no input and no single thoughts about anything that happened around the house. And now all of a sudden he's got an opinion on everything. And by the way, he thinks he's an interior decorator as well. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but I'll take it as good, and we'll go from there. Hey, I do want to talk about a couple of things with you this evening. I want to talk a little bit about the last year, and I'll touch on some of the aspects of COVID and the pandemic and how it's impacted the military. But I also want to talk with you about some kind of the current security environment, and maybe share some insights with you on what we should be thinking about into the future. And then because this is Veterans Day, I do want to take just a couple of moments to also just speak briefly about Veterans Day. So a lot has transpired over the last 18 months, and I don't need to tell this group here how impactful in many ways this country has been on our nation and really on the world. And first and foremost has been through the pandemic, which has affected us and now has claimed nearly 240,000 American lives and many, many more around the world, caused significant economic impact, led to social impact here, and really is unlike any type of other national emergency we've had. We're very well organized to take care of hurricanes and tornadoes and floods, things that are localized and defined in a relatively short period of time. But this emergency has been much different. It's been sustained, and it's affected the whole nation. And the military has not been immune from this. In the early part of this, the Department of Defense stopped movement activities, training for a period of about 60 to 90 days. They've now, to kind of get to understand what was happening and to get control of the environment. They've now resumed a lot of that training. They've resumed deployments, and we've resumed things like recruitment, and are really continuing to move forward. Infection rates in the military are below what we normally see on the civilian side here. At the height of it, the Department of Defense was reporting about 800 infections a day. But they've managed to stay well below the average here across our country. And fatalities in the same way, actually very, very low in terms of overall fatalities. And I think that I credit a lot of that to really the cohesiveness, the leadership, and just kind of the organizational nature of the military and being able to address something like this. Early on, we saw some problems with ships in particular, and there was one notable incident that played out, of course, in our media space there. But for the most part, that has been handled, and there really have not been any significant hot spots or outbreaks of any particular note here. So the military seems to do pretty well. They have a very extensive testing program, kind of a 4-tier testing plan that starts with those who are engaged and our strategic forces that are always on alert. They're at the highest priority. And then, of course, those who are forward deployed in other areas, and then so on and so forth until the whole force is covered. And my research tells me that the department's testing about 40,000 people a day. So staying very, very active in this. And of course, as all of you know, they played a very important role in the response to the pandemic here. The U.S. Corps of Engineers, Army Corps of Engineers, absolutely significant in building backup military or medical capability in a variety of urban areas. National Guard forces literally across the country, as they always do, rising to the needs of their local citizens and supporting them. And of course, the deployment of things like the USS Comfort and the USS Mercy on each coast here to provide backup medical support. But more importantly, the military right now is going to continue to play a very important role in what comes next with all of this, and that is the distribution of a vaccine that hopefully will hit the markets very, very soon here. And we will rely significantly on the logistics capabilities, the organizational capabilities, and in many cases, the investments that we've made into the military to help us with that. The officer leading this is General Gus Perna. He's somebody that I know quite well. He is an extraordinarily capable officer, and I think we're in really good shape with him. And so as we move through this difficult period, we should take some confidence in knowing that the investments that we've made in our great military really now are going to turn around and really help us here at home as we try to address that. And there may be some questions about that a little bit later here, but I'll leave it at that. But 2020 has also been a very significant year for a number of other reasons. Economic pressures, as was cited a little bit earlier by Roger. It certainly had a big impact caused by the pandemic and a broader recession and a rising national debt that are having a pretty big impact on us. I do expect as we move into the future, we will see continued downward pressure onto the Department of Defense and its budget. What this is going to require, and this may be a necessity for us, but what it's going to require is our military leadership and our civilian authorities to really make smart decisions about the things that we are doing and where our investment dollars are going. In a moment, I'll talk a little bit about the future threat, and you'll get a feel for how difficult some of these challenges will be here. The Secretary Esper, who recently just departed the Department of Defense, I credit him with taking some very stringent efforts to address spending in the Department of Defense, both as the Secretary of the Army and most recently as the Secretary of Defense, where he's essentially done the byline budget review of the Department of Defense and made sure things were justified. And in doing that, has identified a lot of resources that can be freed up to invest in other areas without having to come back to the taxpayers for more money in this. And this is what we'll need to do. We'll need to make smart decisions. I was down at U.S. Special Operations Command last week and heard a lot of really great things about what they're doing. The most impressive thing that I heard was a statistic that 22% of their budget right now is being moved around and moved into other new future investments. That's pretty extraordinary. As a former SOCOM commander, I can tell you, 22% of a budget being moved around is a lot. And it really does reflect we have good people looking at the priorities and doing this. So the department's going to continue to deal with that. And of course, 2020 has also been notable for the social and cultural pressures. And those of us from the state of Minnesota, in particular from the Twin Cities, have certainly seen this up close and personal right here. And the military is not immune from this. And we have tried to address a lot of this in our own ranks as well. I think one of the great advantages, and I think one of the things I always loved about the military, was that it is a very, very clear reflection of our country. If you look at an organization, you see people that come from all different kinds of backgrounds, different experiences, different economic situations that bring them there, but yet they come together for a common purpose. And I think we do pretty well in this area, but we need to do better. I would commend it to all of you If you have the opportunity to get onto YouTube and look up a video by an officer by the name of General Charles Q. Brown, CQ Brown. He is now the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, the first African-American Chief of Staff that we've had in the military. And he had produced an extraordinarily compelling video last summer about his experience as a Black officer in the United States Air Force. And it's quite compelling, and it's a reminder to all of us that with as much progress as we have made in this area, we still have a long way to go. Of course, this situation here with the COVID and everything else has also brought to the forefront military-civil relations as well. And what I would just share with all of you, and I'm kind of an observer of this, and I've written on it in several instances and spoke on it, is that the military is an apolitical institution in a political world. And that is exactly the way that we want it. Politicization of the military would be very, very bad for the country. Frankly, it is an important institution in our democracy, and it derives strength by being apolitical. There should be no difference, frankly, in the loyalties of our service members, officers, civilians on the 19th of January as there are on the 21st of January of any inauguration year. And that's the way that we need to think about this. And I always try to remind people that when we talk about this topic, that the Department of Defense and the military in general as an institution enjoys the highest ratings of the American public. Usually favorability in the 70–80% range. And they have done this for a long, long time. And I think part of the reason they do it is because, first of all, they're a reflection of our country. And second of all, because they do stay out of the politics of things and really focus on the mission of protecting our nation. And I think that's the way we have to approach this going forward. One of the other topics I just wanted to touch a little bit on this evening is when I spoke in May of 2019, I talked a little bit about the Middle East and my experience there and what our interests are. But I think over the last 18 months, there's been a lot of focus on what people in the national security enterprise, and many of you have heard, is this idea of great power competition. That we are now in a different, our security situation is different than it has been for the last couple decades. Not dominated by fighting terrorists, but really now by great power competition. And what I would share with you is that this is not a new Cold War. This is not the Soviet Union that we're talking about there. That would be much too simple of a way of describing what we're dealing with here. What we are dealing with in this great power competition is we are looking at how we address a disruptor who is approaching their strategy very deliberately and over a long period of time. We are addressing a disruptor who is not a developing country, but a leading technologically capable country that is a major actor, that is integrated globally and frankly integrated in our country quite thoroughly. We are talking about a disruptor here who is using technology for social control over their own people and their own economy, and who can use that same capability, those same capabilities to adversely affect our interests. And we are talking about a disruptor who is challenging things that we take for granted. The world order, the liberal Western world order that has been put in place since the end of World War II, the rules of the road that guide international relations and discourse, the use of information, the development of markets, the free flow of commerce, all of these things we take for granted. Because we have a system in place, and they are all being challenged with great power competition. And great power competition is likely not to play out in a cataclysmic World War III. That's probably not what we're looking at here. Although military power will be a key element of the overall competition. It's likely to play out, I think, in a continuing erosion of those things we take for granted, such as such as the things I talked about a few moments ago, as well as the shifting of global influence and a realignment of the time-tested norms that have driven the global economy. in academics would refer to this as the so-called Thucydides gap, where we see a rising power challenging an existing power. And I think this is a very real thing that we need to be concerned about. And so, of course, the disruptor we're talking about here is China. And their effort has been underway since really the first Gulf War. They paid very close attention to how we orchestrated our operations there and how we were able to bring so much together nationally and internationally to do that. And they have actively focused on eliminating some of those, our ability to operate in sanctuary, to have partners, to quickly move information, to maintain our overwhelming technical advantage, and essentially to own the clock and do things when and where we thought were prudent, that supported our interests and supported the interests of our allies and friends. And you've seen a lot of actions that the current administration has taken to push back, the trade embargoes, addressing intellectual property, looking at resources, claims of sovereignty that China has made. And hopefully I've highlighted some of the reasons to you why we are seeing this today. And I also assess, as a kind of an observer of this, that there is growing unity within our policy circles, national security circles on both sides here about this approach. And I'm hopeful that as we enter this period of transition, we will see some continuity here. This is an important strategic point for us, and it is going to dominate how we move forward. And it's also going to impact the military as well. It means that we will have to develop different capabilities. We will need to reestablish this idea of deterrence that was so important to us in earlier periods. It means we may be less reliant on the expensive, exquisite, highly manned systems, aircraft carriers, exquisite aircraft, things like that. We may have to rely on other approaches to this. It also means we will have less impunity to stage and operate from wherever we want, which we have largely enjoyed for a number of decades now. And it means that we will have to think about more survivable approaches. Mass through autonomy, for example, are things we have to think about. But there are also implications outside the military as well. National security is going to color more of the discussion. We are in a competition, not just militarily, but we're in a competition for talent, for technology, for resources. Think about something like 5G. Who gets to 5G first? That country, that entity will drive the rules, and it will be important for us. So I wanted to just share a little bit of that with you because I think this is a little bit different today than it was 18 months ago when I had an opportunity to talk with you, and it's certainly something I've been paying more attention to as somebody who is a kind of a student of national security topics here and remaining involved in this. And I think it's an important thing for all of us as Americans to be thinking about and to try to understand, because it is going to dominate, I think, the future going forward. Let me close my comments this evening just by talking a little bit about Veterans Day. As all of you know, today is Veterans Day in America, and it's the day at which we acknowledge those who served in uniform, and I would say their families, for their service to our nation. Veterans, as all of you know, and has already been highlighted tonight, play a very unique role in our society. And they are in all of our communities. And I would bet everybody listening tonight has a story of a veteran that influenced them. It may have been an uncle, may have been a coach, it may have been somebody in the past who through their service and through sharing some of that and the examples and the attributes they took out of that really had an influence on all of us. So veterans are an integral threaded part of our communities here. And our veterans join the service for a variety of reasons. Some of them were drafted. They did not volunteer. Their nation asked them to come in, and they did. Some did volunteer. Some came from families who have a history of service, as Tom talked a little bit about. Some of them are the first in their families to serve. Some of them are joined the military to escape a bad situation, or because maybe they were out of other options that might have been available to them. And many of them are immigrants. and they see military service as a way to thank their country, the country that has taken them in, given them a home, and given them a great opportunity. Whatever the reason, I think we must acknowledge this service. And we are an extraordinarily generous country. And I am so proud of organizations like MMAF and many others across Minnesota and across the country, frankly, that really reach out and extend open arms to our veterans and their families. Veterans offer a lot to our communities. They come with real life experience. They come with experienced teamwork. They know how to work in organizations and in teams. They have been exposed to different viewpoints and cultures, and they've been able to assimilate that. They've learned how to prioritize. And most importantly, they understand the idea of sacrifice, that it takes, you have to give in order for the broader whole to move forward. And these are very, very important concepts, I think. You know, Abraham Lincoln once remarked, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and his widow and his orphan. In doing that, President Lincoln affirmed our very solemn obligation to care for those who have served our nation and who have borne the brunt of that service, whether it has been death or injury or other aspects. And our veterans return to all of our communities with a lot of skills, but they also return with the visible and invisible wounds of service. In a 10-year period from 2008 to 2017, 60,000 veterans committed suicide. We have been working hard, double tides, to address this problem. The Veterans Administration is working very hard. The Department of Defense, there are many organizations that are trying to do this, but it is still a challenge, and it is something we have to continue to focus on. The numbers remain too high, and suicide is too prevalent of an option for veterans who are having difficulty. It's important for all of us to acknowledge this service and to acknowledge the experience that our veterans have gone through. These are extraordinarily important steps that every citizen can take every day to help a veteran. So if you're looking for a simple way to do it, that's a great way of doing it. Acknowledge their service, acknowledge the experience that each of them have gone through, and put it into the context of appreciation from a grateful nation. My point to you, you know, there are many others who, you know, service comes in many different forms. And of course, Veterans Day recognizes military service, but there are many others who are deserving as well. Certainly our police forces, our fire forces, our firefighters, our emergency medical services, our teachers, our coaches, other volunteers. And as the pandemic has revealed all too clearly for all of us, workers who are essential to our lives and our communities on a day-to-day basis, who we may too easily take for granted or overlook. So my point to you this evening is this, is that we should all acknowledge service and be grateful to those who serve their communities and to serve our country. They keep us safe, they care for us, they make us better, they make us kinder, and they make us understand that sacrifice for the common good is perhaps the most important virtue for a great nation like ours. And so congratulations to all of our veterans on this Veteran Day, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening.
And thank you for that, General Votel. Always interesting to hear your insights born of so many years of experience. First question I have for you, I was going to ask this before one of our participants sent it in as well. Is there a danger that the disruptions in our society, not just in America, but across the world from the pandemic, as well as our election here in the United States, that enemies of ours, be they terrorists or another nation, do they see this as a time of vulnerability for us, and that maybe they might think we're taking our eye off the ball, let's say when it comes to, you know, some kind of a third party actor in terrorism? Is that a concern that people think we're distracted?
Yeah, I think that it is, and I think in general periods of transition are always periods of vulnerability, and we need to be on guard for that. You know, we go through this every 4 years, frankly, a transition for another cadre for a second term administration or for a new administration. So, this is something that happens, and it is a period of vulnerability when people are moving out and are moving in and are getting themselves settled. And so it is very important that we do keep our eye on the ball in this. And of course, we've seen a number of things this week that might give people some indications that we may be taking on. I will tell you that while I do have some concerns about that, I also have a high degree of confidence in the capabilities of our uniformed leadership and in our Department of Defense and civil service civilians who serve in the Department of Defense and other agencies of our government, and keeping the rudder straight here and keeping us on track with this. And I think we have to bolster them, and they will help us get through these very, very difficult periods. But we do have to be mindful of this. So this is a period of vulnerability.
And of course, one thing to keep in mind is that we're not the only ones who are vulnerable. It's a pandemic, meaning it's worldwide. So even those who might want to take advantage of this are likely dealing with pandemic issues of their own. And so maybe they're distracted as well. And maybe it's not as much of a threat.
Well, yeah, I think everybody is being impacted by this, but there certainly are groups that would take advantage of this. In my military experience, I had an opportunity to be very involved in the campaign against ISIS, this horrendous terrorist organization that we dealt with, and in Iraq and Syria and in many other places. Organizations like this would take advantage of this. They look for these types of seams. They look for these opportunities where people may be distracted, and while their actions may not be overt, they may use these times to grow and expand their influence, expand their base. And so we always have to be very mindful of that. And I think our partners are the same way with this, that they can become distracted and so focused in on trying to address this horrendous pandemic that we're dealing with here, that we do begin to take our eyes off of this. And that's why it's so important for our military to get through this and get reestablished. And I would just tell you, I remain very, very confident in our ability to do our job, for the military to do their job, frankly, as we work through all of this.
And we have another question that has been sent in. In your opinion, how will the recent turnover of senior staff, such as the termination of Defense Secretary Mark Esper, impact military readiness during what is already a tumultuous period?
Well, I don't know that it will impact military readiness. Readiness is really born down in the organizations, and there are well-established chains of command who are held accountable and are responsible for maintaining that readiness. So I don't necessarily think there will be a degradation in terms of that. I think what really kind of comes into play here is experience and an understanding of how we have to make the decisions in an emergency situation. When you start putting people in who may not have all the experience, and I'm not suggesting that the people that have been put in these positions are not qualified, or other than that, they don't have some amount of experience and other things. They probably do, but these are very complex. They're very uncertain situations, and in many cases, it does require a certain amount of expertise to help us work through these. And so, this to me would be the area that I would be paying closest attention to, and I'm hopeful that our civilian leadership, particularly those that are now in the positions of helping protect the country, are going to rely on the sound advice that comes from the uniformed military as we undertake some of these what may be important decisions in the next couple of months.
Another question, this one dealing with China, and it might be one of those questions where it addresses both our national security and business. How much of a threat is China in terms of, we've heard so much about like TikTok, that they were trying to get information from US citizens to use to their advantage and against us. How real is that threat on a daily basis?
I think it is very real. I think it is very real. I'm not a technologist, and so I wouldn't presume to really understand everything about artificial intelligence. But what I do understand about it is that it becomes more precise, it becomes more lethal, it becomes more capable with more information that is ingested into it. And China has made a major effort in terms of doing this, in terms of collecting information on not only on their citizens, but frankly on many of us and our patterns and the things that we choose to do, and just relatively simple things like clicking on apps and stuff like that. All of this gives them additional information. And so I think this is very, very real. I watched a really interesting show the other night. It was called The Social Dilemma, and I watched it on Netflix with my wife, and it was quite stark. Frankly, it's kind of a combination documentary movie about social media and the threat of it. And many of the people that are speaking in it are people that have developed it in our country. And I think it was a good example of how something like this can actually be used against citizens and then used for national security purposes. So I think we have to, I don't want to damn that whole thing. There's a lot that good that comes out of all of that, and we should look to do that. But we should make no bones about it. China is using this to their advantage, and I expect that they will continue to do it. And I think it is very real.
I want to get back to the pandemic for a minute. None of us really knew how to respond when this happened. None of us have really lived through a pandemic that has been this deadly. We had H1N1 10 or 11 years ago, but not nearly as deadly as this one. And my question is, when the military first had to start dealing with this, they seemed like the rest of society. I know early on, they were saying even if you had recovered from COVID-19, they initially were not going to let you enlist. They later changed that guidance. Later, I know this was all happening back in May, as I recall. How caught off guard were we? I mean, does the military prepare for the possibility of a pandemic?
Well, I certainly think that there are mechanisms. We certainly take a lot of efforts to protect the force and make sure that we, our service members are protected against things like these viruses that come apart. And I can tell you that in a 39, almost 40-year career, we never practiced a pandemic. Frankly, that wasn't something we did. But I think the one thing that I would just highlight about all this, and I know people are wondering what this is a very uncertain situation. I mean, there's a lot we did not know. That we certainly our nation had done a lot of work in how we would respond to this, and in some cases we chose not to follow those paths early on from a national level, and that's another discussion. But my point is this, Tom, is that in periods of uncertainty like this, it's really important to try to fill in the voids and try to get as much information about what is happening as we can. I do recall what you mentioned about the military here, saying that, hey, if you've had COVID, you can't serve. Well, I think now with more information on this, we've been able to modify that. And I think that is a really, really important aspect of working through these periods of extreme complexity, extreme uncertainty, where we fold the information that we're learning back into the decision-making process, keeping all leaders involved in this, and continuing to modify our approach until we have something that is satisfactory and helps us address this effectively. And I think that's really the most important lesson out of this from my perspective.
And I was interested to hear you say that at the peak, I think there was like 800 infections a day. Was that across all branches of the military?
Yeah, what I've read about this is that in general, none of the services particularly peaked one way or the other. Everybody was pretty much about even on this. I know we got a ship here that had some problems, and that, it's a temporary spike, but and you look at across the sweep of time here, in general, that is across all of the departments, and generally all of the departments had about the same experience with this.
Well, and the reason I bring that up is that, and I happen to have this book here on my desk that I'm reading right now. I don't know if you're familiar with it, called The Great Influenza, the story of the deadliest pandemic in history from back in 1917 and 1918, that some think started at a military base in Haskell, Kansas. And as we all know, in the military, everybody's in close quarters. There's no such thing as social distancing on a submarine, for instance. So to me, it's remarkable that the military has kept the number of infections as low as it has. Do you think the military's done a pretty good job?
I do, and I mean, I do think they've done a great job. I think there's a lot of reasons to attribute to that. I think the perhaps the hierarchical nature of the military with commanders and staffs at multiple levels, I think is a very easy way to organize. I think the military, certainly our leadership, I think appreciated very quickly the impact that a disease or a virus like this could have on a military formation, how quickly it could eat it up and render it unready for the nation. I also think we have really good practices in place. One of the great things that veterans and military members develop during their time is this idea of discipline. They follow the rules, and I think that matters in this. And I think a combination of this and probably some other things, I think, may allow the military to absorb and then respond in an effective manner to the virus.
Now I have another question from a participant. Is this a juncture for a revolution of military affairs? World War I was the last real revolution, and will this cause the next?
I think it may be. I hadn't really thought about it in those terms, having lived through a period like that in my career, but I think that is exactly right. I mean, when you look at some of the areas where we are beginning to make investments in cyber capabilities, in space capabilities, and information operations, these areas, these are all new and different areas that are expanding quite quickly. And so I do think that there will be a revolution of some sorts. I mentioned, for example, I think there's a serious debate going on about some of our large, iconic military systems. Think about aircraft carriers. I mean, and what that does for us. Several acres of sovereign U.S. terrain wherever we can position that ship. That's been an important part of our defense establishment, frankly. And as an Army officer and a combatant commander, I vehemently argued to try to get my share of carriers in the Middle East, but they're also very vulnerable. And they are vulnerable to some of the systems that countries like China are developing. And so if we are relying on something that does have, that can be rendered vulnerable by the systems that somebody else is developing, that it should force us into other things. And they're not easily replaced if we lose one. Frankly, I think you all just follow the newspaper and see how long it takes to build an aircraft carrier. That's not something we're going to be able to build as quickly as we did during World War II. We just don't have those processes and industries in place, frankly. So we may have to think differently about this. Mass through autonomy, the use of more robotic and autonomous systems here, whether they're weapon systems or surveillance systems or other systems that we use to establish deterrence. We're going to have to think differently about that, and I think that does constitute a little bit of a revolution in military thought.
Yeah, and we saw how hard it was to ramp up production of ventilators and masks, let alone aircraft carriers. So I understand what you're saying there. Just about a minute or two left with you, General. Our last question for the night. A lot of talk about vaccines for the COVID-19 the last couple of days. Two parts to this, and we'll just have about 2 minutes left for your response. What will be the military's role, perhaps, in distributing that, but also will they be among the first to get it so that our military remains capable and ready?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. That's a great question. So, I think the primary role that the military will be playing in this, and again, I don't have any particular unique insight into this. I've just a lot of my experience and what I'm reading, like everybody is here, is certainly the distribution of this, of getting, these vaccines will come with certain environmental conditions under which they need to be stored, shipped, moved, distributed to hospitals and communities and other places around here. And so I think what we will rely most heavily on the military for is for their logistics and distribution capabilities. This will be very, very important. And this is something that the military, and I would just share the service I came from, the U.S. Army, I think is the best at, frankly, is our ability to get the right things to the right spot at the right time in the right condition. And I think that is going to be really the most critical function that the military's contribution to Operation Warp Speed is going to provide. And I'm very happy to tell you that Gus Perna, our general leading that, is the best. He is the best we've had on something like this. So we have the right person at the right time with the right mission, and I have a high confidence in him to do that. In terms of priorities, I don't know. I would presume, much like the military already tries to prioritize our strategic and forward deployed forces, we'll try to take care of them and minimize their vulnerabilities. But again, I think I don't have any unique insights into this. I would expect that some military forces will rise higher in the priority list over other military forces, and may be over some of the civilian populations that are addressed as well. But that's purely speculation on my part.
I'm going to give you 20 more seconds just to address the people who are watching out there about the importance of MMAF at a time like this, when so many military families already making such sacrifices, and then you compound that with some of the spouses of active military or members of the National Guard losing their jobs in a difficult economy. How important is support from organizations like MMAF, and how appreciated is it?
Well, I think it's absolutely essential. And as the point I was trying to make to everybody in my comments about Veterans Day and those who serve our communities, is that we have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge their experiences. And one of the ways that we can do this is recognizing the sacrifices they've made for us, and helping them and their families through these difficult periods. A little bit of financial resources goes a long way for many of these military members and their families. And it's a relatively small price to pay, as it is for anybody that serves our community.
General Joseph Votel, thank you again. You are such a wonderful resource for us to have right here in the state of Minnesota. Just another one of our favorite sons who's gone off to do great things in the world. And we appreciate hearing from you again tonight, and your great support of MMAF. And I hope to see you very soon. Maybe we can have lunch.
Thanks,
good to see you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you again for his great insights. Now, our evening together is nearly done. I encourage everyone to share what you've heard tonight with your friends and family. A recording of this live stream will be available at thankmntroops.org. Again, thankmntroops.org, just like it sounds. If you haven't already, consider making a donation to MMAF tonight in honor of someone you know who has served. Online donations are always accepted at thankmntroops.org. Remember, even after tonight, anytime tomorrow or over the next year, you can donate at any time. And I will remind you that SIT Investment Associates has underwritten this virtual event to ensure that every single dollar raised tonight, every dollar goes back to our military and their families. And again, thanks to our generous sponsors, over $300,000 has already been raised tonight. That is truly remarkable. And thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to those of you who registered tonight, who got on and have watched this great presentation, and hopefully learned a lot. And again, we appreciate your donations as well. So again, on behalf of Roger Sitt, General Votel, and everybody at MMAF, my name is Tom Hauser from 5 Eyewitness News. Proud to be here once again, and we hope to see you again in person next year. In the meantime, Have a great night.